Hello, good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending on where you're joining from. Thank you for joining our weekly live stream about digital transformation. Today, we're going to talk about managing business processes during digital transformations and ERP implementations. I'll introduce our guest here in just a moment, but we have a client of Third Stages that's on the interview with us here today that'll be talking about this and helping us unpack this important topic. My name is Eric Kimberling. I'm the CEO of Third Stage Consulting, and we're an independent consulting company that helps clients throughout the world with their digital transformation journeys, including their digital strategies, their implementation planning, as well as the actual PMO and organizational change behind the implementations. This is the podcast that covers everything related to digital transformation. We do these live interviews every Tuesday, same time, same place. We're streaming to YouTube, LinkedIn, X, Twitter, or X, Facebook, TikTok, etc. So wherever you're joining from today, thanks for being here. And we are going to get to audience questions here today. So I'd love to hear from the audience any questions you might have along the way as it relates to business process management. And so feel free to drop any questions you have along the way in the chat. Speaking of the chat, I'd love to hear what city and country you're all joining from. We tend to draw a global audience here, so I'd love to hear what city and country you're joining from today. I'm joining from Denver, Colorado. I'll let our guest say where he's from here in just a moment. Love to hear where you're from. So please drop that in the chat, and you can use that same chat feature to ask any questions along the way, and we'll get to those questions as we get through the discussion. Secondly, this podcast is being recorded live, so thank you for being here. We're actually going to take this live recording and make it part of our weekly Transformation Ground Control podcast. What we'll do is we'll edit this interview, add some more content to it, polish it up, release it as a formal episode, and that podcast called Transformation Ground Control comes out every Wednesday, so 2 weeks from tomorrow. You'll see this episode featuring this interview. So by being here today, you're part of the live production of that podcast. So thanks for being here. And if you'd like to see past episodes of this podcast, please go to transformationgroundcontrol.com. You can see all the past episodes we've done, and you can also subscribe on whatever platform you prefer. So again, today's topic, managing business processes in digital transformations and ERP implementations. And joining me today is Scott McAdams from Victaulic. So Scott, thanks for being here today.
Thanks, Eric. It's great to be here with you.
Yeah, great to have you, and appreciate you being here. Before we jump in, I'd love to hear what's a little bit about your background and what it is you do at Victaulic and sort of how you grew up in this space.
Sure. Well, my growth in this space has been very recent. I've been with Victaulic for 19 years and came up through an operations background. I was a plant manager, eventually became director of operations, oversaw several facilities within our organization, spent some time in global materials management. And then about 7 months ago, the executive team came to me and said, hey, we'd really like to have you head up this effort in our ERP transformation. And so I've shifted over now into completely new ground for me. I've been on the project now about 9 months. And this is my first ERP implementation. So I'm learning as I go, but we've got a great team around us, including Third Stage, to help guide us through and make sure that we make the right decisions, do the right things with our selection processes and our business processes and how we shape that into our final solution. And I work for Victaulic. We're a global leader in mechanical pipe joining solutions. Our company goes back to 1919 with our first patent, when they decided that it was very quick and safe to join pipe together with couplings instead of welding. We now have over 4,000 patents around the world. We sell in 140 countries. Our corporate headquarters is in Easton, Pennsylvania, which is where I am located. And we've got over 50 facilities and 7 foundries around the world. And now we're about 5,500 total employees.
Great. Lots of growth and lots of success in that space. Super interesting. I've got to ask you though, you said that you were asked to be part of this project. Did you volunteer? Did you want to do it? You said this is your first ERP implementation. So what were your thoughts? How did that all transpire? And what were your thoughts when you were asked to be part of the project?
It's that's a great question. Mixed feelings. I don't like to venture into things that I'm not very good at, like most people, I think.
Right.
And so there was some uneasiness, but I have a fantastic executive team and supportive bosses that said, the fact that you don't have an IT background and you come from the business is exactly why we want you running this program. Like a lot of companies, we tried before and had some struggles, and we didn't quite get off the ground like we wanted to. And so as we kind of reset and took another swing at this, they wanted to have a different perspective, kind of leading the ship. And so, yeah, when they come to you with an opportunity, I try and tell most of the people that I mentor in their careers, the default answer is yes,
Right.
and then figure out how to do it. Figure out how to learn the skills that you need. They see something in you that you may or may not see, and so I try to take my own advice there, and
Just jump in.
my default answer was yes. Give it a
Yeah.
shot.
Yeah. Just jump in and embrace it. And I imagine it's a good learning experience too. Is it a
It is
lot different than the work you've done in the past?
incredibly,
Yeah.
yeah. It's very different. Although again, we are really taking a look at our business processes, how we do things. We pride ourselves over many years of lean manufacturing and focusing on continuous improvement. So that's kind of ingrained in our company, and it's in all of our blood. And so kind of transitioning that over to, business process optimization and how you incorporate that into your ERP system. And I think there is a nice fit there that they do go well together.
Right. Yeah. And they should go well together. I mean,
Yeah.
and that's what we'll talk about today is just how to better integrate those two kind of different but overlapping work streams. Before we get to some of the questions I have, though, I want to just turn to the audience real quickly. I want to say hello to Darian, who's joining us from LinkedIn here today. Good morning. Fata is joining us from Toronto on LinkedIn. Thank you for being here. And we also have Prashant joining from Delhi, India. Thank you for being here today. And if you don't mind, the rest of you drop in the chat what city and country you're joining from today. And any questions you have along the way, please drop them in the chat. And in fact, I have a question for the audience just to get started as I ask Scott the next question here that I have for him. But I'd love to hear from the audience sort of what you think about business processes and sort of your general headline summary of how business process management should fit into ERP implementations or digital transformations. I'd love to hear any feedback you have from the audience here listening. So please drop that in chat and we'll pull up some of those comments here in just a moment. But while we're waiting for the audience to answer that question, Scott, why, just to start and set the context here, why is business process management so important in this project? Or first of all, I'm making an assumption there. I'm making an assumption that it is important. So let me back up and just ask, is it important? If so, why?
Yeah, I think it's critically important. I think it's important to make sure that your ERP system is aligning with your organization's workflows and really your business objectives. Are you a growing company, and do you need an ERP system that's going to support that? Are you focused really on low cost and high efficiency, and maybe your processes are going to be shaped a little different there? But as I said before, one of the nice things about where I work is we have spent decades working on process optimization and efficiency. It's ingrained in us from day one with the company, and so really driving the most efficient way to do things, whether it's through our manufacturing process or our business processes. We have groups within our organization that go out and focus on that and help all of our different groups within our organization be leaner, meaner, more efficient, get more done with fewer people. Um, and so that's it for us. It was a great benefit to have that already as we started looking at how do we get on a new ERP system, and what of those efficient processes can be brought forward, and also which of them really don't align with a new, cloud-based standard ERP system. We have very heavily customized traditional systems within our company that have helped drive a lot of that efficiency. We built them to be efficient. And so really getting, the organization around taking a look at those business processes and determining how do you transfer that forward
Mm,
into a new system where you really don't want to have heavy customization. And that's been one of our big challenges for us. But that's why it's so important as you're picking the right ERP system and making sure that you're aligned with your business goals, and having your processes to support that.
yeah. Yeah, exactly. And I think it's easy for us to think as, change practitioners or project managers of these projects. It's easy to think that, Well, why worry too much about the business processes, because the software will sort of dictate that to us. Have you come across that, or what are your thoughts on that school of thought that just defer to your software to help you define what those processes are going to be?
Yeah, we have, and I'll admit that that creates quite a bit of conflict for us because our processes in a heavily customized system are incredibly efficient and lean.
Mm,
And when you're going to a standardized system, you really have to take a look at, okay, which of these processes work in this new system and which ones do we really need to change? And even if we have to give up a tiny bit of efficiency for the larger gain for the organization to get on a new platform, um, that's really some of the decision making that we're having to do, and really accepting standardization versus the heavy customization that we're used to that have helped drive a lot of our processes to date.
yeah.
So that's kind of the conflict that I have found in our group. You know, I see both sides of it. Again, I came up in a factory where efficiency was everything. You wanted everything to be as lean as it could possibly be. And so to tell somebody, well, I need you to give up a little bit there, and these steps are going to be a little more manual. But when you look at the big picture, we're far better off as an organization have being on this new platform.
Yeah.
Um, so that's kind of the struggles that we're seeing right now as we make our journey.
Yeah. Now, you mentioned how you're already a lean operation, and a lot of clients we work with are implementing ERP to help them become more lean, or they're because they're not lean and they're hoping that ERP will help them do that. How do you navigate that conflict, or have you run into conflicts where the standard process out of the box is actually less efficient or
Yeah.
not as lean as you're used to operating because you have a custom environment? Have you run into that? And if so, how have you navigated that?
We have, and I'm curious to hear what the audience says for that because I can't say we've always navigated it perfectly, but we kind of take a look at the benefits of standardization versus the cost and impact of a customization. And sometimes the customization is really what we found. We can't do everything in our ERP, so we're going to go out and look for another platform that can integrate into it, and that's how we've solved some of that.
Hmm.
So the whole, front end of our business, we find is not really well done in an ERP system. So we want to find, somebody outside that does that much better. And so now our processes align better with what they bring to the table. So that's one option that we've kind of pursued. But we are genuinely trying to avoid any customization of the ERP at all costs. Configure where you have to, but only customize when there's no alternative. And we're still early enough in the process where we've not had to make those hard, firm decisions yet on the customization. Um, but that is a struggle for us, where we know that we're very efficient and we don't want to give that up. So we're trying to find ways to kind of meet in the middle, and again, without customizing the platform.
Yeah. Yeah. That's good sound advice. And kind of walking that fine line between recognizing the strengths and the operational capabilities of the company that you don't want to lose, but also recognizing that, there are possibilities to either improve by adapting to the system or finding a system that can bolt on, that can fit that better.
Yeah, very much. It's important, I think, for every organization to find and know their special sauce. What is it you do really, really well, and what drives your uniqueness in the marketplace? And don't give those things up.
Right.
But if it is something that if it's keystrokes and efficiency gains there that we could give up a little bit and not impact what's special about us, that's really where you make those sacrifices.
Yeah.
Knowing the difference between the two, it's not always easy.
Yeah. And it's probably not always cut and dry. And I imagine there's probably some politics and biases and just fear of change that sort of gets wrapped up in that decision too.
Yeah,
Have you seen
yeah,
that as well?
absolutely. I think fear of change is a big one. Um, and I think that's why your change management is so crucial. Getting people's heads around the fact that we must change and why, not just
Mm,
that we need to, but why. What is on the other side of this for me as an individual, as a group within the organization? Really showing each of them. what the benefits are when we get there, even if you have to give up a little bit in the meantime, it's worth it. And having a big picture mindset, it's easy for people that sit in the C-suite to have a big picture mindset, but when you're in the fight every day and doing these functions every day, it's hard to have that big picture mindset. We've really got to, as leaders, we've got to train them on that, get them up to speed on, this is much bigger than just this. And yes, you may have to make a slight sacrifice, but here's the benefit we all get from it.
Right. Absolutely. Well, speaking of the audience, you mentioned you'd be curious to hear from the audience. I want to turn to them real quickly here and get to some of the comments. Emil is joining from Toronto, originally from Toronto, but dialing in from Miami, Florida, because Toronto is too cold. Thanks for being honest. Why you're in Florida, and that does sound a lot warmer than Toronto right now. Paris, this is funny. Paris is joining from London. She's interested to learn more about ERP. So I imagine you get a lot of jokes or confusion around whether your name is Paris or whether you're from Paris, but you're actually from London. So thank you for being here today, Paris. We have someone joining from Kelowna, British Columbia, and a couple comments here that people have chimed in on. Actually, let me say hello to someone else joining us from Belgium. So thank you for being here. Sorry, I don't see your name there, but someone is joining us from Belgium. And then here's a couple of comments here I want to get to. Oops, that's my question. We don't need that one. This comment is from Anastasia, and Anastasia says BPM should feed into any automation initiative, which I agree. So that's a great comment here. Here's a question from Amy on LinkedIn. It's fairly uncommon for an organization to be as mature as yours in their business process optimization journey. That bodes well for a retrofit to your chosen ERP. For organizations less capable in that area, having a best practice business process set up to start from helps create a solid foundation. What are your thoughts on that? I know, she's sort of saying that maybe you didn't need to do that as much because you're more mature operationally, but have you seen this comment to be true?
Yeah, I do think it's true. But even in a mature organization like ours, our processes, as I said, were really built around, really our ERP system was custom built around our processes. And so you're still going to have to do a lot of changes and a lot of optimization to fit those into a new platform, because the new platform is going to operate differently. You don't have all of the customizations that we have grown used to. And so really understanding how our operations can still be done. You still get to the same end goal, but it's maybe different steps to get there. And really educating everybody and training them on those new steps is really where we are in our journey.
Right. Yeah, that makes sense. Here's a question that's sort of just jumping into the line of fire here, just jumping right into it with the business process management topic. And I'll hide this question here in just a moment so we can see your face again, Scott, but I want to show it to the audience. What do you convince? This is from Emil on LinkedIn. Emil says, what do you do to convince enterprise PMOs to plan for current and future state business process design before onboarding the SI vendor? I'll stop there.
That one's a little tricky for us because as I said, we have an entire organization designed around business process optimization within our existing platform. And so, we really needed to bring on the SI for us to really understand the new processes and what we wanted the new system to be and do, and ingrain it into our North American operations. One thing I didn't mention earlier is we're bringing our North American operations onto a platform that our global operations are already on. And so we have some unique experience there because our global operations are already on the platform. They know the processes. And so what we end up with, and where some of the conflicts lie, is because we're so much more efficient in North America on the existing platform, merging that with a less efficient operation and processes outside the US posed a pretty big challenge as we went about this the first time. And so we're kind of taking a different approach now, bringing North America onto the platform. And then down the road, we're going to worry about the global standardization versus doing that up front, which may seem counterintuitive to a lot of people that do this, but again, because we're coming from two different directions on it, this is what made sense for us to focus on getting on the platform. That will force a lot of standardization. But then once you're all on the platform together, you can really drive global standardization where it's appropriate. Again, our models are different in different places around the world. How we sell, and so how we process. So we've got to come to grips with that down the road and decide, do we want to standardize those, or do we still want to have unique ways of doing business around the world? And sometimes that does impact your ERP system.
Yeah. Yes. And it's not one size fits all or one answer across the company. I mean, it sounds like what you're saying is there's some instances where one path is better, the better option. There's other parts of the business where it doesn't make sense to standardize.
Yeah,
Um,
exactly.
Here's an interesting comment that I'd love to get your feedback on. This is actually from Deja. I hope I'm pronouncing your name right. Deja, who's, by the way, is joining us from Atlanta. So thank you for being here today. And Deja has the question here. Great point here. Great question. Is it worth to make small enhancements or integrations within 1 year leading up to the transformation? Or is it better to wait until the big change and fit into that process? And I'd love to hear your perspective on this, because you're a process guy. You're not an
Yeah.
ERP or a tech guy. So you might have a kind of unique perspective here. What are your thoughts to Deja's questions here?
Yeah, my unique perspective is continuous improvement. I think you make all of those small enhancements leading up to it for a number of reasons. Number one, you may think it's 1 year, it may be a little further out, and maybe you missed out on some improvements you could have in the meantime. But even that 1 year is a long time to give up on an improvement or an enhancement that you could possibly take advantage of. You don't want to invest a lot in. I'm assuming these are different systems that you're trying to integrate within a year, and so it may be a balancing act there. But I always shy on the side of, let's take advantage of any improvement we can do today, get the benefit of it that we can, and not wait for the big bang and the big change to come, because
Right.
you think about it, you're just adding to and making it bigger. You
Yeah,
could be
exactly.
taking out some of those, but smaller bites now, and accomplishing those along the way, and it would also start to ingrain in the organization that drumbeat of change. That
Yeah.
we're going to start that change now. It's going to be little, and then it's going to be more, and then it's going to be more later. But you get them in that mindset of change as early as possible.
Yeah, you bring up an awesome couple of points there. I mean, the summary, or the way I would summarize or add to what you just said, is that the business process piece of it, changing the processes and changing the culture, those two things you mentioned, that's actually the critical path too. That's the stuff that's going to slow you down on a project like this. So even if you're just purely looking at it from a technical project perspective, it's still going to help you, because it's going to not speed things up, but it's not going to slow you down, because that you talked about a big change becoming bigger. Well, when that big change becomes bigger, that leads to delays, that leads to resistance to change, it leads to misalignment within the company. There's all these different things that come out at the time of training, or at the time of kind of formally introducing all these new changes. If you do all that stuff a year out and work through all the messiness of that, that's just less you have to deal with when you actually get to that, go live date, or get closer to the go live there.
Yeah, absolutely. And like you said, the challenge is going to be the people, the culture, and the mindset. Our CIO is always quick to remind me the technology is not going to fail us. We've got to make
Yeah.
sure that the people get where they need to be, because that's usually where you fail. And so, we certainly are taking that approach, focusing on the people, focusing on the processes and the mindset around it, and shaping that to accept that change down the road. And as we talked about earlier, that's where the change management really fits in, and it's probably one of the most, if not the most critical aspect of the program.
Yeah, absolutely. We're going to come back to change management. Don't worry to the audience here that loves change management. We are going to talk about that. I can't get through a conversation like this um, without getting more into that. I want to get to a couple questions here. Here's a nice comment. Shawcat on YouTube says, "Hi, Eric, you're doing an amazing job to help businesses in their IT transformation journey. I appreciate the consultation support of Team Third Stage. in developing my ERP project. So thank you for your kind words, and I'm glad our team is able to help you, Shawkat. Here's an interesting, this is sort of going back to a point you made a little bit earlier, Scott. This is from Darian on LinkedIn. Darian says, you mentioned that avoiding ERP customization is a priority. What are some of the specific areas where you felt the strongest pressure to customize? And how are you evaluating those trade-offs? And if I could maybe just add a little, maybe another dimension to that, are there certain functions, just at a high level without giving anything too secret away or whatever, are there certain functions or sort of processes or workflows where you felt like those were particularly vulnerable to a mismatch between what you had that was already a strong process versus what an ERP system might fall short on?
Yeah, absolutely. And first, good morning, Darian. I appreciate the question. Um, yeah, I would say for us, it's really around the front end of our business, the way we take in orders and process orders and manage those orders. We have, like I said, a pretty heavily customized, incredibly efficient way of doing that today. And what you find is that that's not really the specialty of a lot of ERPs. And so, that's where a lot of the struggle has been and the pressure has been to customize, because again, a tremendous amount of efficiency gains between our different operations, and those that are using these existing tools versus those that are already on the platform. And so we're having to really come up with, how do we want to handle that without customizing the ERP system? That, again, we're not doing it. It's forbidden. We're not touching the core process there. And so looking at other alternatives outside of the ERP that integrate well and give you back most, if not all, of those efficiency gains. And there are, wonderful platforms out there that do order management systems and e-commerce very well. And so evaluating which of those is right for us is really what we're working through. And that's kind of where the challenge has been. But again, these are great challenges. I'm really happy that we have such efficient processes and people that want to fight for those processes, because they built them over many years. And that's how our organization has got to where it is today. And in order to make that step into the future and be able to scale up our business to grow even more, we need to get on a new platform, and we need to get on platforms that are going to support that. And so
Yeah.
That's kind of where we are right now in that journey.
Right. Now, what about, we touched on this a little bit, but I want to go a little deeper here on looking at, let's talk about current state versus future state.
Sure.
How much time, what advice would you give to someone trying to figure out how much time should I spend on current state? Should I spend any time on current state? Should I worry about current state? Should I just focus on future state? How do you navigate that balance? We talked about the balance between standardizing and adjusting to the ERP software versus the way your processes were. But if we set that aside and shift gears and look at just current and future state in general, what's your advice to companies trying to figure out how to address those two different parts of business processes?
Yeah, no, and my answer is, it's critically important to know your current state. And whether you work in an organization that is constantly reviewing that, again, I would put us in that category where it's always being looked at, always being reviewed, and trying to find ways to do it better and more efficiently. Or whether you're an organization that really, I don't know, we have a process, we don't really, we've been running it that way for years. It's important to know what your process is, what your steps are, and ultimately what your business requirements are for a new system. So that's really why it's important to have that current state thoroughly understood. Whether you do that through mapping or whether you do that through other ways, can be different for the business. But knowing what those steps are, and the easiest way is through mapping, but knowing what your processes are in your system today will help drive what you want them to be in the future, and finding areas in there where you maybe have bottlenecks, or maybe have, some challenges along the way that you can address as you're transforming into a new system. Knowing where they are and being able to go after them, I think, is critical for being more efficient on the other side of it. And so again, building your future state around where those bottlenecks are and addressing them, but also what your company's business goals are and business objectives are. So it is critically important to see that current and future state both.
Yeah. And in my experience, I'm curious to hear what you think if this resonates or if you have a different perspective. But it seems as though with a lot of clients, by looking at the current state, there's some unintended secondary benefits of doing that. I mean, one is that from a change management perspective, you're able to better plot out or map how people's jobs are changing, and you're able to help them more effectively through the change journey if you know where they're starting from. If you don't know where they're starting from or you don't fully understand the current state, you can't just throw out the future state and expect that people are going to somehow understand that if you repeat it enough. They need to understand how it relates to what they do today, first of all. And then second of all, just by asking people how they do things today, I feel like it's almost like not therapy necessarily. Maybe it is organizational therapy. It's like you're listening and understanding how they've built these robust, complex, convoluted processes because they didn't have good tools to
Right.
work with. And understanding that goes a long way from a change management perspective because people now feel like, okay, Scott understands. He's not just the process guy coming in to tell me how I have to change everything or throw everything out the window. He actually understands. He asked me how I do things today, whatever. It may still change. It probably is still going to change, but at least he understands now where I'm starting from. Have you seen that to be true, or have you seen that
Yeah,
phenomena at all?
absolutely. And I think not also just that you care enough to ask them what their process is, and now they feel engaged in the program. That
Yeah.
if you didn't do that and you're just working on the future state and you're not pulling them in, they're going to feel less inclined to buy into it. Where if they felt like they were part of the initial and they were part of mapping out your current state, and then bring them in and part of mapping out your future state, understanding where their challenges are, I think it's a huge help for change management and getting that buy-in with them. Absolutely.
Yeah. 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 Great point. Here's a couple other comments I want to get to. This is from Emil on LinkedIn. Says, unfortunately, too many organizations try to cut corners on projects by skipping the current state analysis work. It's often seen as a nice to have instead of a risk mitigation tool. And I would add to that, I think we've worked with a lot of clients where executives, especially at the executive level, will say, um, let's not bother with the current state. Why are we even bothering with that? We know it's going to change. We know it sucks. We know the current systems suck. Let's just ignore that and let's focus on the
Yeah.
future state. And I understand why you'd want to think that way. It's sort of human nature. Let's not worry about the past. Let's worry about the future. And that's what good leaders do. But, for all the reasons we just talked about, that current state has a lot of value that I think goes overlooked. Now, you don't want to get too caught up in analysis paralysis and, mapping out to the nth degree all the granular details of how your current processes are working. That's not going to be productive. And that's probably a point of diminishing return. But just understanding at least the macro level, how things work, what tools are being used, why you're doing things the way they are, what the strengths are of what you're doing today, so you
Yeah.
don't lose that. All that stuff is really important in the current
Yeah, I
state.
think exactly that. Knowing where your strengths are, knowing where your bottlenecks are, being able to carry some of them forward and being able to address the bottlenecks, I think is the key. And if you don't know where those are in your process, I don't know how you develop a future state effectively.
Right. Yeah, exactly. I totally,
Yeah.
totally agree with that. Here's another comment from Amy. Amy says, I always said that being a successful PM includes therapizing the stakeholders and users. I'm going to steal that word,
Yeah, that's
therapizing.
pretty good.
But then she has a follow up question here, again from Amy on LinkedIn. Thank you for all the great questions, Amy, by the way. Amy's interested to know how the SI structured the SOW for your project to factor in the current to future state. Did they go for granular, specific, or low detail with open ended requirement specs? So maybe just more generally, how did the SI or the technical partners you're working with, how did they view current state? Did they care about current state? Did they build that into their plan? How did you What are your thoughts
I
there?
would say they were probably less concerned about it than we wanted, and we kind of have had to bring them along in that. Again, us being a unique organization where part of it was already on the platform, I think they came in with a very simple mindset of, listen, I just need to get you on the same platform they're on. And, our business function said, whoa, hold on. We do things very differently here for very specific reasons. And here's the efficiency and the benefits of doing this. And so that really posed some of the challenges between a current state and a future state for us. And I would say we're still working through those today. I wouldn't say we have them all resolved. Um, but yeah, I think that because of the uniqueness of our situation, where We were already on the platform. It kind of came in with a mindset of, I don't really care what your future state is. You're already halfway on or where your current state is. You're already halfway in the future state. Let's just get the rest of you there. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Really interesting. Um, this, let's see. So I want to shift gears and come back to change management for a second, or maybe a few seconds, because this is always an interesting angle to come at. But when you're looking at change management, I mean, just at a high level, I know this is a really broad question, but just as a starting point or as sort of a headline level, how do you view change management in these sorts of projects and enabling process changes as well as just fitting into the overall transformation project?
Yeah, I think for me, the biggest things are just keeping everyone aligned. And whether that's through just communication, I think that's the biggest part of the change management for me, is making sure everybody understands where we're headed, has a constant stream of communication, feels that it's a dialogue and not just one way. They feel they can ask their questions, get thorough answers. I think having that alignment with the company's goals and objectives and making sure everyone on the project understands those. And then you get into training and making sure that people understand the new platform, working with the SI for that training. And how do we not only get the project team on it, but then long term, how do we train the entire organization? We're not there yet, but that is a big question I have, of how we're going to do that. We have, a couple thousand people on this system globally, and we've got to have that training rolled out, for what we're going to do differently here in North America, as well as some of the changes they may see globally with what we're doing. So yeah,
Yeah.
those are the biggest things for me, is just keeping everybody on board, keeping uh, everybody rowing in the same direction, I guess.
Yeah. Did you have much sort of cross-functional collaboration, or do you have much cross-functional collaboration, or how did you build that into
Yeah, we
the
do,
project as
and
far
I
as getting
think
people involved?
it's been easy for us to build that in, because we started with a cross-functional executive steering committee. And so having that in place to really force, where needed, the organization to adopt what we're trying to do here. And again, cross-functionally is the key. Um, so the entire team is very cross-functional and working very well together on, really lining out your entire end-to-end process and knowing your part in it, but how that affects the entire process end to end. And so, yeah, for us, it's been great having that cross-functional steering committee. They've spoken to the team several times. They've done videos for the organization. They really do push that forward to make sure everybody understands we're all in this. It doesn't matter if you're in sales or, operations. We're all on this project together, and we're all working together for one common solution. And then, like I said, as we get
Right.
into those end-to-end processes, it's a lot easier to have those conversations, because they know far up the food chain, they support this, and they know that we need to work together on it.
Yeah. So did you have, despite that sort of framework and that approach to change, which I think is very effective, do you still have resistance to change? Are you still seeing little pockets of resistance throughout the organization, or certain functions or departments, or
Yeah,
how would you
there are
assess that?
still, I don't know that I want to call them resistance to change at this point. There's uncertainty, because we
Right.
haven't defined what all of our future processes are going to be quite yet. And so those that have worked very hard to bring lots of efficiency to bear, there's uncertainty as to what it's going to be. And there's uncertainty as to, do I really need to give this up for the greater good? So I'd say we're at that stage. There is some resistance, but again, I think it's more wrapped up around, I don't mind doing things differently. I just don't want to do them inefficiently. And so if we
Right.
can get to the same endpoint and not have to increase headcount in an area, then I'm good with it. I'm not resistant to the change. If you tell me in order to get to that same endpoint, I got to add 20% to my headcount, that's where I'm going to start pushing back on you. And I think those are fair. Those are legitimate concerns. And again, coming from an operations background, that's near and dear to my heart, and I understand and am doing everything I can to help those groups get what they're looking for without a heavy customization, and finding that somewhere in the middle that we can meet.
Right. Right. Here's an interesting question from Darian again on LinkedIn. Darian says, as you move towards your future state, how are you ensuring that decisions made today won't create roadblocks for scalability down the line? So in other words, rather than just looking at what's the optimal current state for us today, how do you think beyond that and think, well, what about 5 or 10 years from now? What kind of process do we need to put in place now to prepare for that scale and growth
Yeah,
later
and I
on?
think that goes to our core principle of not customizing. We want to take advantage of upgrades, of changes in technology. I say to a lot of people, and you're much more aware of this than I am. As a society, we're at the precipice of major change in AI driving this entire industry. And so I
Hmm.
use this example with everyone. Everywhere you customize or you build something internally, you're giving that up, because you're not going to be able to drive those changes internally where you're partnering with a major corporation that does this, and they have entire groups in their organization driving AI, and putting that change out through future upgrades. And we want to take advantage of that. We want to ride that wave. And so that's really a huge thing for me, for why we don't want to customize anything today so we don't regret it later. I want to be open to every single possibility in the future that I can take advantage of through incredible technology advancements. So that's kind of our guiding light as we head through the project to do that, and eliminate those roadblocks down the road.
Right. Right. Makes sense. Here's a comment or a question from Rodrigo on LinkedIn. I'll try to summarize it. It's a long question here, but I'll try to summarize what I think he's trying to get at here. Essentially, he's asking whether agile waterfall or a hybrid approach is appropriate given the long term strategic impact of ERP implementations. Is that something you were involved with, or if so, how did you guys navigate deciding whether you do more of a traditional waterfall approach, which is more the sequential stage gate based approach to ERP implementations, which is kind of the historic way of implementing ERP systems, versus Agile, which is more incremental changes and rolling out, getting technology out faster and incrementally improving. And I know you guys mentioned continuous improvement is a big thing to you guys, Scott. So you may already have an Agile sort of mentality within the organization, or is a hybrid between the two most appropriate? Is that something you were involved with making decisions on, or how did you guys
Yeah,
navigate
I
that
can't say
overall?
that I am, but I would, given those descriptions, I would say we're definitely much more waterfall. We're not making, we're not releasing things between now and then. We've got a go live
Right.
date that we're shooting for, that we bring everything to bear at one time. But certainly getting things integrated, testing them along the way, making sure that everything is functioning properly and doing exactly what we need it to be. But yeah, I would say waterfall is our approach.
Yeah. Yeah. I think for a company like yours and what you're trying to accomplish, that makes a lot of sense. A lot of organizations get enamored by Agile, thinking like, oh, Agile's faster and it's less cumbersome than a waterfall approach, and we get more immediate value. And some of that can be true at times, but the problem is you end up sort of gravity pulls you back to the way things are
Yeah.
right now, when you take that Agile approach, because you are moving so fast and you're not taking that time up front to get that alignment and really slowing things down. I don't mean slow it down in a bad way, but you sort of have to slow things down to make sure you do get that alignment and that clarity on what you want and work through all that stuff, then deploy the technology that fits
Yeah,
that
and,
model.
and we're going through such a huge change from our existing platform to a new platform that I think we would struggle along the way if we tried to release things um, without having our customers visible to it, internal and external. We want to have smooth processes, and we want this to be blind to everybody involved. Uh, so I think we
Right.
we would struggle along the way because it's such a major change.
Yeah. Yeah. What about user adoption and engagement? I know we've been talking a little bit about change management in general, and um, how to involve people and how to prevent that potential resistance to change as much as you can. But what about further down the line when you get to user adoption? And I know, depending on based on where you guys are in the project, that you may not know as much about this yet, or you may not have as many lessons in this phase yet. But what have some of your early lessons been as it relates to what you guys are going to need to do to ensure you get that user adoption engagement with those new processes and the new tool sets you're rolling
Yeah,
out?
I think it's safe to say we're not quite there yet, but some of the things that I will be looking for as we get into that is, really showing everybody what the long-term benefits are, not only to them, but to the corporation. And really making sure that we do very good training. We don't want anybody to feel like, "Oh, I'm not ready for this change." I want everyone in the organization to feel, you know, very fluent in a new system before we turn it on. And then really supporting them after the go live and being able to walk them through challenges that are going to happen, and being ready for some loss of efficiency just because you're on a new system that's going to quickly come back as people get used to it and get up to speed, versus efficiency losses that maybe because you're doing it differently now, and it is slower, knowing the difference and being able to react appropriately to each one. But we don't want anybody on the other side to feel like, wow, I used to be able to do this in a minute, now it takes four, and I don't know how I'm going to do this. We want to make sure that that's all thoroughly vetted, and everybody's on the same page, and we've done everything we can to make it as efficient as possible when it gets turned over to them, and we want the best training that they can get before we release them.
Right, right. What about some of the process owners within Victaulic? Some of the process owners, the subject matter experts. How did you involve them, or how have you involved them in the process of defining current state, future state, and just being involved in the ERP project
Yeah,
in
yeah,
general?
very much so. We identified global process owners for every one of our work streams. They are actively engaged in the project, and ultimately they have a lot of say in the processes and the process changes that are made within their work stream. We truly do treat them like a global process owner, and so engaging them, having them with full input into the changes, making sure they understand why we need to make this change, and getting their buy-in so that they can support it down through their organization has been critical for us. But they are absolutely a core part of the team. And then bringing in the subject matter experts that know all of the nitty-gritty details, and being able to explain, this is why we do this today in these 12 steps, um, is very beneficial for us defining how we want to do it in the future, knowing why those 12 steps were put in place. It wasn't by accident. And so that they've been a critical bridge for our knowledge base between our current state and our future state. And so, yeah,
Hmm.
we've had a pretty large team. Every work stream has global process owners, work stream leads, subject matter experts that are all working together and then cross functionally to really define what these processes are going to be.
Yeah, yeah, I'll echo what I think it was Amy on LinkedIn, or and if it wasn't Amy, it was someone on LinkedIn mentioned a few minutes ago. They made the comment that you guys are a more mature organization in many ways when it comes to process management, and just the fact that you're in the role you're in, and you have such a prominent role on the project, on a technical project, sort of demonstrates or sort of illustrates how Victaulic views business processes as being so important. But despite that, despite the fact that you guys are so mature in the business process arena, what are some of the most common pitfalls, or have you guys run into any pitfalls when managing business processes as it relates to this? Or what have some of the challenges been trying to manage that transition from current state to future state and optimization and all
Yeah,
that good
and
stuff?
I would say back to what we've been discussing, the biggest thing for us is, knowing how efficient we are and not wanting to give that up, and being able to create new processes or find new solutions that help us bring that efficiency forward. That's by far been our number one challenge. Um,
Mm,
and so working around that, having those teams engaged, but having them be open-minded. Look, I do it this way today and it's very efficient. I don't want to do it that way because this is the way we do it. Okay, well, the system requires this. And, being able to kind of work through that discussion and those, um, conversations to get to what we can do, maybe through some slight configuration or, you know, bringing in certain aspects of the core platform to do things differently, versus how you do it today in your heavily customized platform. That's been the biggest challenge for us so far is our moving off of and changing that mindset from our heavily customized, internally developed platform.
Yeah. I could see an organization like yours that has that maturity and that focus on process optimization, even outside of this project, even well before this project ever started. I could see that being a strength, but I could also see it having a dark side too, to where there's sort of a perception that, hey, we are lean, we are mature in our business processes, we have optimized our processes. This software over here is not optimized. The software is not. And in some cases that may be true, but there may be other cases where, well, okay, maybe that's not true, or maybe there is a way to reconcile the two more so than, the average process person might think. Have you seen
Yeah,
that to be true at all?
absolutely. And the one thing, you get into finance, purchasing, a lot of things that are just standard. There's no challenges there. You're going to adopt it. It's going to run the same way. Very standardized processes like that. Ours really has been around, again, what I would call our secret sauce. The way we handle orders differently is where we have focused years of, um, lean and process improvement. And so those become our biggest hurdles to move forward. But we're making great progress. And I think you gotta get creative. You got to find the right solutions. You got to get people's buy-in that we're going to have to give up a little bit, but teach them what the broader goal is, and we're going to get there. But yeah, there've been some challenges along the way with that.
Right, right. So looking forward then, we look at AI and just the advancements in automation and technology in general. How do you see the discipline of business process management function changing? Did you see your job changing, or how do you see your job changing in your field of work changing as a result of AI and other emerging technologies?
I think it's going to bring automation to bear and do things much faster. I think getting critical data points on your current process and understanding where the bottlenecks are simpler, being able to leverage that technology to point you where you should be focusing your efforts on improvement, I think is where it brings the most benefit. Um, Certainly automating processes is great. Being able to, scan documents right in to become an order has been already a big improvement for us. But I think as we look forward, I really do think it's going to be analyzing your processes at a level and at a speed that is really hard to comprehend today. And so that'll help a lot on the current state mapping and understanding, again, where are the things that are running really well, where are the bottlenecks, and being able to attack the right things. I think that's where AI is going to make the biggest difference around business process management.
Right, right. Now, what about those listening right now and watching right now that are going through an ERP implementation? Maybe they've thought about business processes, maybe they haven't. But what sort of advice would you give? Kind of closing advice to get to, what kind of closing advice would you give people to get started on the journey or to be effective in business process management in particular as it relates to their ERP or digital projects?
I'm sorry, was that for me or for the audience? Oh,
No,
oh,
for you.
I'm sorry. I was trying
Yeah,
to read
yeah.
some of the comments at that time. You told me I was going to get distracted by the comment.
I did. I warned you. There's a lot of. It's a
Yes,
chatty group,
yes.
which I like, but it can be
We'll
distracting too.
edit that out earlier. Can you
So
ask that again?
yeah, well, that's funny. I always tell people that too. I'm like, don't you can watch the chat go if you want, but it can be distracting, and you fell right into it. You
Yeah.
almost made it through though without it. But I was asking like, what one piece of closing advice would you leave to um, project team members that are about to go through an implementation, or maybe they're going through it right now, what's the closing advice you'd leave them with on the biggest things they need to know about business process management as it relates
Yeah,
to
I
their
think,
project?
prioritizing your process alignment over the customization. Again, I've talked about it several times. Knowing where your uh, special sauce is and fighting to retain that, but not clinging on to what can be standardized through a new platform. Um, don't get
Right.
hung up on it. We've done it this way for many years, and we know that it's the right way because there's a new future out there. And as I said, if you can get to the same end point, just with different steps along the way, you've still gotten to the same end point. So understand those steps along the way, and how you were doing it may not be the way that works best with your ERP. But if you want to take advantage of future upgrades, of AI advancements, avoid heavily customizing your platform and clinging on to that, because it's just not a good long-term solution for you. And 10 years from now, who can even envision what this space is going to look like with advancements? And if you build your own system and you're still on it 10 years from now, you've missed that entire boat. So that's the biggest thing for me, is really understanding what your processes are, and standardizing everywhere that you can, and customizing only where absolutely necessary.
Yeah, it's great
Yeah.
advice, and really appreciate you coming on here today, Scott, to talk about your experience, especially given the fact that you're not a traditional tech ERP guy. It's good to hear your perspective coming at it more from the business and the operational side of things. And I love that perspective, and really appreciate you
Yeah.
being here
Thank you
today.
for having me. It
So
was
thank
a great conversation, and thank you to the audience. Great questions. I appreciate it.
Yeah, yeah, perfect. Yeah, and to echo that, thank you to the audience. Really good questions here, and hopefully you found this helpful. And there's so much more we could talk about. Whether it's around change management or implementation strategies. I mean, there's so much we didn't get to, but this is a great start to a conversation around that. How can people learn more about Victaulic, and how can they connect with you,
Yeah,
Scott?
Victaulic.com is the best way. Again, we're a private company, and we're really proud of our longevity and our growth. It's a great company to work for, and we're really looking to grow this business into the future, and really be able to scale up through our ERP. You can find me on LinkedIn, and happy to consult with anybody there.
Yep. Scott Adams. If you search Scott Adams, Victaulic, and Victaulic is spelled Victaulic. For a long time, I made the mistake of having two L's in there. But it's Victaulic. So if you search Scott Adams, is a fairly common name, but if you search Scott Adams Victaulic, you'll find
Many
me.
years ago, they combined the
Um,
words victory and hydraulic into the company name of Victaulic.
I
Yeah.
did not know that. Wow. I feel like that's something I should have known before now, but but that's a good story. I'm glad I know that now. Well, good. Well, thanks again for being here. Thanks to the audience. If you like this conversation, you like conversations like these, we do this every week, same time, same place, wherever you're watching or listening right now. We'll be here again next week with a different transformation topic. Next week, we're going to talk with Marcus Harris about the legal implications of digital transformations and the contracts behind it, especially as it relates to AI and intellectual property. We're going to get into that a little bit more next week with Marcus Harris. And then 2 weeks from today, we'll have another client of ours on the show from Boston Dynamics. Chad Wright is the CIO there, and we're going to talk about robotics within manufacturing. So that'll be a good conversation too. So those are just two of the guests coming up. But every Tuesday we do this, same time, same place. This interview will get polished, edited, and we'll add some new content to it. We'll re-release it as a formal polished podcast episode in 2 weeks. So go to transformationgroundcontrol.com if you'd like to check all the past episodes of that podcast. We've been doing it now for about 4 years, 200 plus episodes. So be sure to check it out. There's a lot of good guests out there, and another great guest here today. And appreciate, Scott, you being here. Appreciate everything from the audience. Hope you all have a great week, and we will see you all
Thank
next
you.
time.
Take care.
Take care.